views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Hi, welcome. This is Dr. John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail. Wow, everyone. Oh, my goodness. It is so great to be connecting with all of you. What an amazing time. And I got to tell you, today, the lineup, the shows, the conversations, it is exactly the B12 shot of spirituality and transformation that I needed today. And I am just going to stop for a minute and say hello to Mr. Benny. It is so great. So great to have you here, and a shout out to the folks across the prairie at WBLQ, Brian and the guys over there. Mr. Benny, how you doing?
Hey, doing well, Pat. Once again, another hour in store for us.
Yeah, just another one under our belts, right?
Yeah.
All right, but here's the question. Are you ready?
Yeah, I got an answer.
Oh,
Am I not supposed to actually answer that? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, then we can let Dr. Dan go.
Yeah, he better. Have the professional do it, yeah.
Do you know how to live your life with more ease and more grace and put an end to stress, Benny? Yeah, right. That's what I thought. Right.
Add another screen to my countertop? That might.
Yeah, we got the yellow light that goes on whenever there's dead silence in the radio studio. Today's show is about that with Dr. Dan Cohen. Now, what I love is he and we spend a little time outlining what the shows are going to be about. But, you know, the question is, what happens when we actually get on air? And Benny knows this, right? But Dr. Dan Cohen is a neurologist, inventor, and author with the focus on technology and writing related to personal and spiritual development. For those of you out there that have been sending us emails on the dialogue that went on, you know, between, and we'll talk about this during the show today, the dialogue that went on between the ego and higher self, yes, that's Dr. Dan. And we're actually going to be doing more of that. Because the world we live in today, and I shared this before, the world we live in today is calling for a level of expansiveness. And I don't mean about our bank accounts, but that is not excluded. Expansiveness in a way that we can look at healing. We can look at psycho-spiritual effects. We can look at what vibrations. We can look at how the nervous system and energetically respond. And we can literally tap in to a level of essence that many of us didn't even know we had. How do I know this? Because I'm part of the work that Dr. Dan has been doing. We're going to talk about what he has created, this technology as we like to refer to it. I actually am not sure that that's what it has meant to me. But I've been able to work with Dr. Dan and work with the technology and become to a state of relaxation to allow for the creative juices to flow. Today's show is about tapping into that for yourself. Dr. Dan, it is so amazing to have you here. Welcome to the show. Happy New Year to you.
Oh, thank you, Pat. It's great being here and back at you. Happy New Year.
I would like, you heard me ask Benny the question, do you know how to live your life with more grace and ease and put an end to stress? Well, guess what? That's why you're here today with us. Because I know for me, I don't want to live my life. So let's start with the opposite and you can help me out. I don't want to live my life, with it being hard, with it being difficult, and with walking on eggshells of stress. all the time. I don't think our listeners do. How do we begin to put an end to that?
Well, I think you have to realize that stress is something that is purely born of ego. And the best way to really do away with stress is to allow yourself to move beyond simply operating from an egoic standpoint. You know, it's learning how to put that aside and truly be what you are. That's the key.
Yeah. I want to figure out who I really am. And I would love to ask you a question about this. I refer to the conversations between the ego and the higher self. And I wanted to say that in the past couple of days, Dr. Dan, you know, I've had a couple of situations which have shown up in multiple parts of my life where I had to choose how I was going to respond. And sometimes many of us respond, whether it's a relationship we're in, you know, or a significant other doesn't put out the garbage or whatever that is that's going on. And yet we go from 0 to 120 ballistic in our response. Where on the stress continuum does that come from?
Yeah, that's far on the right. And clearly, you know, you've lost it at that point. You know, you're deep into your coping strategies or defense mechanisms, however you wish to call them, because you're responding out of some level of fear or a level of disharmony that is far removed from that which you truly are. I mean, you know, I think the hard part for people is saying, look, conceptually, I understand I'm a spiritual being, but frankly, I only get that at an intellectual level. I'm not experiencing that. And the key is learning, how does one experience that? How does one learn how to be in that state on a routine basis so that they don't fly off the handle and just have these egoic coping responses, which is all they are. And they're all born of fear. They're all born of you know, harm that has been done, you know, perceived threats. These are the issues that one needs to move beyond in order to experience what they truly are. And I think, you know, part of the issue that we have here is we have a society that says, okay, great, you know, I'm going to go to a psychologist or a therapist or somebody who's going to help me along these lines. And what you end up doing is you go through a lot of processes that do nothing more than tweak the ego. It's like, okay, let's work to change the ego, as opposed to how do we put the ego to sleep, or how do we move beyond the ego, be what we truly are, understand what the ego is from that vantage point, from being that, so that we really aren't responding in that way from within our ego. That's the key, and that's really the dialogue that, you know, that you and I have been having behind the scenes.
Yeah, you know, it is really the conversation that for many of us, understanding, you know, what you're talking about, you know, as stress being our response to life's events, you know, we create it and we can end it. See, I think the first part of that, I think we're starting to get a handle on, Dr. Dan. I think we're starting to believe that we can create it. But I will say this. Okay, and this is where I get to become a real student here today. But here we are. Can we really end it? See, if we believed that, yeah, totally in it, we create it. But can we really end it, Dr. Dan? I think if we believed that, perhaps maybe we would take a different action. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. We definitely would take a different action. But okay, this is the key.
All right.
A lot of people say, yeah, I want to do that. I want to go there. I want to be in that way of being, that state of being that allows me to be beyond the ego. But are you truly willing to do what it takes to get there? And it doesn't just happen because you want it. And it doesn't just happen by saying, I'm going to let it happen. It's, are you really willing to set aside the ego? Are you willing to take the steps necessary in order to make those changes? And, you know, I'm sorry to say, very few people are really willing to commit to those levels of change. And I don't mean to offer something that's disheartening, but people really have to step up if they want that change. And, you know, I see it in a number of people who come to me that say, I'm fed up and I want to do it. But by and large, you know, most people aren't willing to go there.
Okay. So, you know, one of the things you and I are going to talk about today are going to be this idea of understanding the benefit to live our life with more grace and ease, to put an end to stress. So when we're talking about this, you know, people want to know these days, what's the end game? What's the end game? Of course, yeah, it's football season. Everybody knows that the end game for most folks is the Super Bowl right now, right? That's the end game. It's up in everybody's face. But what is the end game? What is that thing that we can keep in mind? If, in fact, I can learn how to live my life with more ease and grace and put an end to stress, then what might I expect my life to look like? We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Dr. Dan Cohen and I, we are going to take you down that yellow brick road. What's behind the curtain? Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
Transformation Talk Radio is dedicated to the education and awareness of Lyme disease.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Lyme Talk Radio. I'm Dr. Pat, joined here by
Dr. Nusheen Darvish.
Dr. Pat Basili and Dr. Nusheen Darvish will be bringing the most innovative, groundbreaking information, research, treatment innovations, and stories from those it affects every day.
I'm so excited to be talking about this.
We have so much to share.
Dr. Darvish and I are planning to do is connect the dots.
People suffering with all sorts of chronic diseases, it's time. It is time for them to transform.
Tune into Lyme Talk Radio and help keep our mission strong.
For the loyal listeners out there that have been listening to this incredible show on Lyme disease, we are not going to let you down. We're going to come through stronger and enrich the platform for Lyme disease awareness through Lyme Talk Radio. The message will continue, the conversations will become stronger, and the healing epic. Have you ever tried maca? Meet my friends at the Maca team. They are dedicated to bringing you the highest quality, traditionally grown, organic, GMO-free maca supplements on the market. Their high-potency maca products have a vast array of health benefits and will make the perfect gift for that special person this holiday season. Use maca in your shakes, baking, herbal teas, and much more. Visit drpatspicks.com today to see our holiday offers and specials.
Enlightening, humorous, and compassionate. Listen live to The Kelly Ballard Show, insight and inspiration from the great beyond. Kelly is a fourth-generation medium and intuitive who covers topics ranging from grief, spirit guides, and listening to your intuition. Kelly can help you get answers and guidance from the other side with a little bit of humor and a lot of healing. Tune in to The Kelly Ballard Show, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Time here on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Naturopathic doctor, founder of the Martha's Vineyard Holistic Retreat, and author of the New York Times bestseller 21 Pounds in 21 Days, Dr. Ronnie DeLuce has helped tens of thousands of people, including celebrities and athletes, with her message of lifestyle change. Now Dr. Ronnie DeLuce wants to help you. You too can be saved. Email Dr. Ronnie DeLuce at info@RonnieDeLuceOnRadio.com and visit mtheholisticretreat.com. Dr. Ronnie DeLuce, your partner in wellness.
Are you ready for a game changer? Sarah Westall is bringing you Business Game Changers Radio. Sarah brings you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Tune in to Business Game Changers Mondays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Hey, everyone. It's so great to have you all tuning us in and turning us on. And by the way, as we like to say, for those of you out there that have questions for the show, have questions for Dr. Dan, want to chime in on the conversation here today, we have a toll-free number, 1-800-930-2819. And, there are a couple of websites which we'd like to make sure you all go to. One of them is addictedtomyego.com, addictedtomyego.com, and you're going to be able to get a copy of Dr. Dan's book there. It's really quite fascinating for me to really sit down and work with Dr. Dan as, we go through some of the things that are so important to each of us in knowing how to take that next step in our own personal development. And the technology that Dr. Dan has created is amazing. And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about, what does it mean to be able to call upon technology to help us change, to help us reduce stress, to help us to become more of who we were meant to be. Thanks for joining me here, Dr. Dan. It's so great to have you on the show.
My pleasure.
I wanted to talk about, I want to talk about the technology for a minute because, it's almost weird now for me to refer to it as technology because I was sharing with you during the break that I'm starting to really be able to observe myself, my patterns, and things that are changing for me. And I don't quite understand the process and what's happening. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what the technology is that you've created. And then let's talk about what people are experiencing.
Okay. I think if we start with the technology, it's really synchronized sound, vibration, and electromagnetic fields. And the purpose of the technology is twofold. One is, let's use the sound and the vibration to, in essence, put the brain to sleep. Really put the physical brain to sleep. And our instructions, as you know, we tell people when they get in the chair to simply go to sleep. And because we vary the intensity of the sound and vibration periodically, the technology will really wake the person up a bit. So most people don't end up sleeping while they're in the chair, but they exist in a state where over time, the brain actually will fall asleep, even though the person will retain awareness, which is a real clue that our true awareness is not something that is just brain-based, but it is beyond. But that's more complicated. Mm-hmm. The other, the electromagnetic field stimulation that occurs, it's really designed, and this took us about 12 to 15 years to understand how to do this, is really designed to stimulate what we truly are. It stimulates the human energy system so that that aspect of you and that part of what you are in terms of who you truly are comes into play in a much greater way, in this life through this body. And and that's really the magic of the technology. So what we're trying to do, think about a person as being split-minded in a sense. Mm-hmm. Think of a person as being what they truly are as a spiritual being, and then what they've created themselves to be in this life, which is more egoic. It's your beliefs, it's your coping strategies, it's all those things that you do at a mental level, and you're really not that. Okay, that's really a fiction, but that's who we all seem to be, the way we operate right now, as people. So the key here is let's put that part of us to sleep and let's wake the other part of us up. And as you learn to make that transference using the technology, because you literally, what happens is you literally start to become that which you are while you're in the chair. And you start to experience that. And the major difference is that is a state of being that is appreciated through your feeling nature, as opposed to the ego, which is experienced through your thinking nature.
Mm.
Okay? And so what happens, and you know, just as a little caveat here, women are much better positioned in our society to achieve greater results faster, because in our society, women have been, it's been more allowed for them to retain greater feeling, okay, greater feeling nature. Whereas men, particularly people that are my age who grew up in the 50s and 60s, I mean, we weren't allowed to show our feeling nature, you know, as guys. I mean, that wasn't cool, you know. So men have a little bit more of a learning curve than women using this technology, because what you really want to do is you want to embellish your feeling nature, because that's how what we truly are, our spiritual self, really comes into play and manifests. It's through that mechanism, and over time, as that becomes the primary mode of how one operates, then you've totally transitioned beyond stress, because stress is all born of ego.
Mm. Mm. You know, let's talk about stress, and one of the stress's sidekicks, so to speak, worry.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about worry for a minute. You know, a lot of times when, you know, we're kind of about our day, we don't really equate worry to stress, or we don't really look at the effects of it. And as a matter of fact, you know, most of the time we walk around and we're worrying about things that either happened in the past or are going to happen in the future, right?
Yeah.
And we don't even know we're doing it, though, Dr. Dan, right? We don't know we're doing it. We're thinking about that. Can you talk a little bit of worry and the ego?
Well, worry is purely a result of the ego.
Mm.
Okay, it doesn't come from anything else. It comes from your belief that things could go wrong, may go wrong. The antithesis of worry is trust. Okay, if you're operating from what you truly are, you know, without the ego, you will have implicit trust that things will work out as they need to. Okay?
Yeah.
And even they may even work out from the way your ego would perceive as badly.
Right.
Now, let's say, you know, you're facing financial difficulty and a bankruptcy is imminent.
Right.
That may not be the worst thing in the world. You know, I mean, the ego may consider it to be a horrendous thing, but it may set you up for all sorts of positive things that happen after that. And if that really was the case, and you could really tap into what you truly are, there would be a level of trust that you would experience that would say, hey, this is okay.
Right.
You know, but the ego, on the other hand, would say, oh, no, I'm going to worry about this because I don't think, you know, people are going to perceive me badly. Where am I going to get my next meal? What's going to happen here, there, or everywhere in regards to my inability to, you know, keep myself going financially. So there's all sorts of things that happen egoically that, you know, we really, that are fictions, because we don't know what's going to happen. And that sense of inner trust, which, by the way, comes from that deep feeling nature, which is from what we truly are, that can't happen if we're focused at the egoic level. You just simply won't be able to appreciate that.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that you and I were talking about a little bit during the break was I was trying to explain an experience, and, you know, the technology that Dr. Dan has created in the chair, we're going to talk about quite a bit as we move forward over the next several months. And for me, I love being able to share, my experience. And the reason I love to share it, Dr. Dan, is because, I'm not coming from this place of being the technology guru around this. I'm purely somebody that, through your amazing generosity is able to experience something unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And, I would love to talk with you about how we get to create a change, how we get to move beyond, what our ego may be directing us or controlling us, some people like us to say, controlling us to do. How can we experience a greater expansive level of ourselves? How do we know that we're actually doing it? A lot of questions for Dr. Dan today on the show. Dr. Dan, what is the best way for people to find out more about you, more about the chair, the technology, more about your books, and anything else you'd like to share?
Well, obviously, you can go to the website toolstoawaken.com to learn about the technology and a little bit more about my process in this whole thing. But I think the best way really is to go pick up the book "Addicted to My Ego."
Yeah,
because that book will not only describe technology, but more importantly, I think it gives a very clear understanding about ego versus what we truly are, and the steps that are required to really help move beyond ego. Because that's the holy grail here. That's really what we all want, because that's how we all end up feeling better. And frankly, that's the only way we're going to change the world. And we're not going to change it any other way. We have to change ourselves first.
I know. Wow. This is really amazing. When we come back, we're going to take you on a journey. What is it that each of us can learn about what's possible in transforming our lives, transforming our nature, and allowing ourselves to literally show up in a way perhaps that we haven't before. We're going to take a short break. Dr. Dan Cohen joining me here today. What is that thing about the ego that is so mystifying and yet so addicting? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The doctor is in. Tune in to the hit show, The Psychic Love Doctor, with host Deborah Lee. Deborah's life-affirming, highly perceptive reading method has taught Deborah how to zero in on specific problems with relationships, career pursuits, and current roadblocks to success and happiness. Join Deborah Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific, and for a special broadcast the second Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Do you want the freedom to spend more time with your loved ones? Travel the world? Live spontaneously? Get ready, because the Chip Justice Show is here. Hosts Dr. Pat Basile and Chip Justice can help you build meaningful success while embracing life. Living a life you love is the end game in this new, inspirational, and empowering show. Positive changes for a life you'll love. Tune in every month on TransformationTalkRadio.com and visit PositiveChangeInstitute.co for more information.
Tune in to the Angels and Answers Psychic Radio Show with clairvoyants Artie Hoffman and Sky Siegel every Thursday for a 2-hour show, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Transformation Talk Radio. Artie and Sky deliver spiritual and motivational messages with passion and a sense of humor. Call in 800-930-2819 for live and on-air readings. Visit ArtieHoffman.com and SkyofAngels.com. Get into it for 2016. Do you want more prosperity, clarity, energy, and balance in your life? Join Lynn Brown now through March for one of her amazing workshops, each focusing on a key part of living your best life. For more information and to register for one of these amazing workshops, visit LynnBrownEvent.com. That's LynnBrownEvent.com. And get into it this 2016 with Lynn Brown.
Called the Oprah of radio by her listeners, award-winning host Dr. Pat Baccili is blowing the doors off of traditional talk radio. Get ready for an energizing delivery and powerful interviews with leaders in the field of human potential. Dr. Pat's fresh, new perspective on living life full out has catapulted her show to the top of talk radio. Tune in and Dr. Pat will help you thrive instead of merely survive. Visit thedrpatshow.com. That's THEDRPatShow.com for listening times in your area.
I know when he's been on your mind, that distant look is in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It is so great to have all of you tuning us in and turning us on. It's amazing. You know, I am so thrilled to be introducing you to Dr. Dan Cohen, a friend and a colleague. And, you know, I have had the opportunity and, you know, he and I have just started our conversations together on air and sharing this with all of you. And yet in the short period of time, you know, I've gotten to experience his technology. Some things are changing in me. Now, how do I even know that? People are pointing them out. And we're going to talk about them a little bit today because I'm not able to explain them to all of you. But I know Dr. Dan is. And, you know, he and I were kind of chuckling during the break because, you know, based on what he has been creating for people, he probably sees this a lot. But for me, not so much. Dr. Dan, it's so great to have you here. I really would like to point to a situation that I shared with you during the break because it's directly related to our topic today. It's related to the idea of ease and grace and less stress. And one of the things that I think we discover in life that if each of us were meant to live by ourselves, to not have any interaction with people, we probably would have been given our own planet, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Maybe you get Mars, and Pat, maybe you get Jupiter. But it'd have been us. We wouldn't have any interactions. We could sit and be and figure out the essence of being. But that's not the world we live in.
Correct.
And so here I am today, and I've had a situation which I'm working through. And I've had people in the team say to me things like, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you didn't react. I don't know, you know, how you didn't respond differently. We don't understand why you're not angry about the situation. And even today, given that, you know, one day we have a great conversation, the next minute I get an email as if the conversation didn't happen. And I'm just not feeling the kind of response that I think people want me to have. So can you really talk with us a little bit about what is actually happening? How is it several months ago I would have responded in a very different way? And by the way, folks, this could be about your spouse, with your children. It could be such points of anger that may show up, and you would justify to yourself why you want to respond. But I didn't, Dr. Dan. And by the way, I don't really feel like responding that way. So can you explain how my using this technology may be operating here?
Yeah, there's a couple points to make that you said, okay? One is you didn't respond in a way in which you would have previously. But I think even more importantly is the comment that you just said about I didn't feel the need to.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me tell you what's happening because we see this all the time. This is essentially what the technology does. If you know the human energy system, which is really what we are as a sort of a spiritual being, the lower three chakras and the auric bodies that are associated with those really hold a lot of the junk from the lower mind, okay, from the egoic mind, because they deal with, you know, all our safety and security issues, you know, our lower feeling self, our mental self, so including our beliefs. And if you were to be able to see these auric fields, for instance, you would see in most people a lot of blocks and contorted energy, twisted energy, a lot of things that had to be worked through, basically because we hold a lot of beliefs and stuck emotions. And so you develop these patterns and you operate using those patterns in life, okay? And so in the past, if you were confronted with the same situation, you would have gone through these pathways and you would have, responded in a way that is something that you conditioned yourself to do. It's part of who that ego was, okay? What the technology does, what our chair does, is by stimulating the human energy system the way we do, a lot of those blocks and twisted energy structures literally are released. So they're not there anymore. And when you do it enough and you become comfortable with the fact that you don't need to recreate those patterns, then when you're confronted in life with those situations, you don't operate using those patterns, which is, one, why you didn't, and number two, why you didn't feel the need to, because those patterns aren't there anymore. That's the benefit of using the technology on a regular basis. You get rid of these things, and therefore you egoically are different. That's essentially how it works.
Yeah. It's really kind of interesting to step outside myself. The other part of this is, let's talk about our higher self for a moment, because your book, Addicted to My Ego, really, I love this book, Dr. Dan. I love it because a lot of times we can pick up a book and we can read it intellectually, and then we could say, oh, yeah, I got it. But then what you do is you take us on a journey. And you take us on a journey about a conversation or a dialogue, let's say, between the ego and the higher self. And I could now, looking back, even as this morning, as I was crafting an email back, I can hear that dialogue happening with me as to how I was going to write the email, right?
Exactly.
Right. The first version of the email, I am so glad my higher self jumped in there and didn't let me send it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's happening is, as you release these blocks that I was just talking about, these old patterns, what it does is it frees you up to be more receptive, because now you're not stuck operating the same way. And so as you have this newfound freedom, you are receptive to receiving input from what you truly are. Okay? Think of it as a seesaw.
Yeah.
Okay? On the one end is the ego, on the other end is your higher self. Okay? So now you finally have a more level playing field where the two can interact. Before, the ego was way up, it was on top, and it dominated. But as you let go of these problems, these blocks, then it's a more level playing field, and you literally start to have this inner dialogue that allows you to bring in the wisdom of what you truly are. That's what you're experiencing. And as you do that more and more and more, you tip the scales further and further, so that over time, that aspect of you that is operating in life is that higher self, as opposed to the, what we would call the egoic self, which really is just a cover over of all of these blocks and maladjustments.
Yeah. Here's the question. And Brenny, I'd love to skip the break. Here's the question. People might say, why, Dr. Dan, why do we want to make this change? Now, I'm going to ask you about this for myself, but some folks may say, wait a minute, I've been reading all this stuff, Dr. Dan, about, look, I need to express my anger. I need to be adamant. I need to draw healthy boundaries. I need to put my foot in the sand. Well, I got to tell you, I'm a Sagittarius, and my foot never goes in the sand. It goes right in my mouth. And so the good news is I'm getting a lot of help from you, Dr. Dan, here on this. But you know that old argument? Maybe it was growing up in the 60s that I got that argument, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that fiction or is that fact?
I think it depends on whether or not you want to remain ego-based and continue along the path of unhappiness. If that's what you want, hey, we got a perfect society for it. Enjoy. I mean, imagine it this way. Let's say you were walking down the street and you saw two people having a fight. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it wasn't about you needing to jump in and protect one of them. They were just having an argument over something, and you have a choice. You can say, do I want to live like that? Do I want to join in on their fight? Or I see a nice park, a little beyond them. Maybe I'll just walk to the park and enjoy myself and sit in peace. Mm-hmm. It's your choice. If that's the life you want, if you want to engage with people in this way, great, have at it. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if you want to move beyond it and really start to experience what you truly are, it's time for a different tact. It's time to move beyond this egoic way of being and start to learn how to allow what you truly are to manifest in this life starting now.
I love this. Dr. Dan, I'll tell you what I'm really struck by. For those of you just tuning in, by the way, Dr. Dan Cohen joining me here today. He and I are going to spend a lot of time together because, this is really a time, as many of you have said, we ask you to pick 3 words which are really important to describe the energy. One of them that our listeners, Dr. Dan, described, which is actually at the top of the vote right now, is expansiveness. The energy right now people feel is expansiveness. I can't help but think about what you've written in your book about how to claim your basic rights. And I was reading this again today. I read this earlier, before I started to work with the technology, and now I'm reading it again. So here's what I want to say, and I'd love for you to comment about it. When I first read this, I kind of did a mental checklist. And you're probably thinking, no, her ego did a mental checklist. And I looked at these 10 basic rights. And I thought, wow, these are lofty. This morning I looked at them and I didn't see them as so lofty. But I actually saw some of them coming to the forefront for me. Can you talk about these basic rights and why you say to us to claim our basic rights?
Okay. The basic rights are hierarchical. They start out with the rights of, we as a personality, those aspects of us that, do operate egoically, but don't have to be the centerpiece, okay? And it does not have to be the way we operate all the time, or frankly, it doesn't have to be the way we operate at all. Okay, but they are there. Okay, so the early basic rights deal with that. And then it moves, as you move to the heart and beyond, it moves to those aspects of us that are higher self-related. And then beyond that, it moves to that which we are collectively. Okay, because really, I mean, as you progress along this path, what everybody will ultimately find is that we're all one. We're all the same. Okay? It's the illusion that we face in life makes us seem separate, but that is not what we truly are. But anyway, so these basic rights really articulate this kind of progression. And I believe that what we really ought to aspire to is developing ourselves in a way that we can realize what we truly are, which really is the path that I think has been designed for us.
Wow. Here I am. Here you are. And we I believe, we as human beings have the ability to imagine and create. And, every year, Dr. Dan, I sit down and I think about what's going to be my theme for the year, what's going to be, as we do with the show, what's my theme? And what I realized is, up until yesterday, what I realized that, I do believe in a higher self. I do believe in an energy force field, whatever people call it. Some people say God, some people say source energy, whatever that is. But here's what I discovered yesterday. And I discovered it after spending about 10, 15 minutes, maybe actually it was longer, in the chair. I discovered that I had been putting the limits. I had been imposing limits on this source energy. I had been putting limits on it. So, for example, I had put a box around, what would happen if I made one decision versus another. That was it. It was in a box. And I also then realized that I put a limit around the world of possibilities. And I will say this to you. It's not a place that I'm used to coming from, but for whatever reason, I had started to do that last year. So my theme this year is to take the limits off, to my self-imposed limits off of that energy. Is that the ego that would have us play, right? Play in this game of life, play not to lose as opposed to play to win.
Yeah, well, and the ego is that which sets limits. Here, let me give you another example along the same lines, because, I think you figured it out. But I had a similar kind of occurrence over the past week. I as I told you during the break, I've been having these episodes over the past year that have been associated with my spiritual development, and I got into the chair a couple mornings ago to do a session, and as had been customary for me, I would have a prayer in the beginning, and it would be followed by an intention, and then I could not create an intention, and then it occurred to me that the intention was nothing more than something that was coming from my ego. There's no reason to set an intention. I'm really just going to be what I truly am. There's no intention that's required. And again, dealing with the ego is a slippery slope. I mean, it's a pretty tricky, tricky beast, and really, it's learning again and again and again in many different settings that we are what we are, and to get there, we just have to feel. Just sit in your feeling state. Be in that state, and that's what we are. And that's what I practice when I'm in the chair, so that I can take that state out into life, and I try to spend as little time throughout the day actually thinking, and instead, if I can be in that feeling, being state, then everything I need is right there, and it just comes when it's required. But it's something that we have to get used to.
Yeah, I love this because, this is really for all of us today as we're thinking about the lives that we would love to create for ourselves. It goes back to the title of the show today, this idea of ease and grace, and having that be the norm as opposed to, something that happens once in a while. So the question, I guess, is what does it require, Dr. Dan? What does it require of us to be willing to trade in our stress for ease and grace? What does that really require of us?
I think that what we have to look at is the concept of letting go.
Boy, yeah.
We have to loosen our grip on everything from, the petty issues that we deal with regularly, down to what we even consider ourselves to be in terms of our own self-identity.
Mm-hmm.
We have to just allow the walls to fall, allow everything to just level out and just be and witness. And which, again, gets back to your point about learning to truly relax so deeply that you can let everything go.
Yeah, that kind of leads to a conversation I know we're going to be having next time we get together. But that tightening grip and that response, I can't remember exactly who said it to me many years ago, says that basically fear becomes a normal way to operate. Fear becomes a normal way to operate. And I think, fear and ego, I think that they got married.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're a married couple.
Oh, absolutely. Well, fear is of the ego. Fear is not of your spiritual self. Your spiritual self has nothing to fear. It's only ego.
There's one of the things I was reading in the book, and for those of you that are just tuning in, Dr. Dan Cohen joining me here. The book is amazing, Addicted to My Ego. One of the things that, I know we're going to be talking about in a future show, but it's worth mentioning and kind of leaving our listeners with now today is you talk about, spiritual progression. As a matter of fact, I love the chart in here, psychological and energetic. One of the things that I was really struck by is how often coping comes up in our society, how we cope with somebody else's anger, how we cope with a job that we don't like. That is the strangest word for me these days. And I don't know why I'm having such a reaction to it, because it's kind of like, I would like to let go of coping, Dr. Dan.
Exactly. You've hit on an excellent point. The reason coping has come up is a great example of how distorted we've become psychologically. So we basically are so fixated at the egoic level that we were spending all this time psychologically trying to fix it, not trying to move beyond it. So we're literally so mired in it that we cannot see anything else, that we literally have developed all of these mechanisms like coping to, in essence, perpetuate the ego, but to modify it. So rather than saying, wait a minute, I don't want to be stuck at this egoic level, that's no longer an option for most people. If you go to a therapist, it's all about, let's figure out the best way for you to cope. Well, really? So you want me to stay stuck in my ego? I don't think so. I mean, that is exactly the reason why we developed the technology we did and the techniques that we talk about in the book, Addicted to My Ego. It's like, wait a minute. I don't want to sit here and learn how to make a better ego. That's really not going to make me any happier. I have to learn how to move beyond the ego to be what I truly am. That's the pathway to happiness, not massaging the ego.
Yeah. And, this is really what I love about, the work that we're doing here, Dr. Dan, is you and I get to have progressive conversations about this. Because how does one, and this is for our next show perhaps, how do we go from coping to creativity? And why is creativity, for all of you out there for our next show, why is the creativity the gateway to our heart's desires? Dr. Dan, thank you so much for today. One last question. What's your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today? Thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, thank you, Pat. My message would be trust in what you truly are. Go deep, feel, allow that to emerge, and not have to worry about the ego. Really go within, allow your feeling nature to become much more expansive, and live from that vantage point.
Wow. Thank you so much. Dr. Dan Cohen, everybody. Thanks to all of you for living life full out. We'll see you next time.